everyone, and welcome to a very special episode of GQM Garage. I know this has been very long overdue, and I don't know why I put it off so much, probably because I was a little bit nervous, just because this car has been so significant for everything in my automotive doings. But tonight I'd like to officially unveil my 1993 FD3S Mazda RX-7. So I like to start things off with a little backstory in these reviews. So I feel this is important because it just shows how significant this car has been to everything that I've done. Back when I was getting into cars, I was a front-wheel drive Honda guy. My first car was a 92 Civic hatch, and I had several other Civic hatches. Come around 2004, I was into my freshman year in college, and I had turbocharged. I had a 92 Civic hatch at the time, and it had a B18 C1 GSR swap in it. I was looking for a tuner, and having been in the university's car club, a friend that I had made there, he had introduced me to a friend of his who was a tuner. So he tuned the car for me, and then him and I ended up becoming friends. We've been great friends ever since. I'm 32 now, so this is a long time ago. We met when I was 19. And he was a big rotary guy. And he kind of introduced me to RX-7s and rotaries and really gave me a thorough understanding of how they operate and just what makes them so special. Now, I knew about the RX-7, but I never really had given much consideration to it because at the time it was, well, rotary, I don't know anything about it, forget it, I don't want it, and two, they were just way too expensive. So when I would go over there and hang out, I was getting exposure to first gens, second gens. He had one or two third gens in and out of there, but he had bought this car from Maryland, and he bought it to build the engine on it and then turn it around and sell it. So it came back, it was a 1993 Touring, and it was an automatic. When he had this thing in the garage and I laid eyes on it for the first time, I walked around it, and I can't explain the feeling that I got, but I was awestruck by the car. Especially coming from doofy hatchbacks, no offense to any of the Civic lovers, but a hatchback is kind of a doofy car. And looking at my car, and then looking at this side by side, I was like, God darn, this thing looks like a piece of crap, and this is gorgeous. I was just absolutely enamored by the lines. So I had made a deal with him to buy the car. I wanted it. I started researching RX-7s, learning about the engineering that went into the suspension design and just kind of all the things that made the FD such a legendary car. And at that point, I said, I want this. This is the direction that I want to go in. I want to start exploring the driving aspect, like really the driving aspect of being a car enthusiast. Things happened, and I had sold my Turbo Civic hatch. I had a daily 89 Civic Si. I sold that. I was bumming a car from my parents, and I was banking money, working 2 jobs, and just banking money wherever I could. I had a lot of cash. I don't think I've ever had that much cash ever since that time, but I had a lot of cash ready to go to buy the car, and he ran into some things in his life where this got put on the back burner, and he didn't end up finishing it. So I had all this money, and that's in comes my 1991 Miata. I bought that because I wanted an RX-7, and I needed a car. I saw the 91, and I said, wow, that's kind of like a mini RX-7. Bought that, fell in love with the Miata. Now the rabbit hole opens. In comes NB, then S2000, then and so on and so forth, and here I am today. Fast forward a little bit to 2010. He got the car running, motor put together, and got the car built and running. And the timing of everything just kind of worked out perfectly, because if I had bought this car at that point in time when I was young and had no real rear-wheel drive driving experience and didn't really know what the hell I was doing, I would have totaled this car in a heartbeat. So in effect, the way everything kind of transpired, it worked out perfectly. When he came up for sale, or when he said he was selling it, I really wasn't in a position to buy it, but I buckled down, sold a bunch of stuff, took on side jobs wherever I could, and just packed away money and came up with it, and here it is. So 2010, I bought the car. I wasn't terribly in love with it because when I got it, I mean, I was enamored, right? I bought my dream car. This was and always will be my dream car. I love the FD3S RX-7. Everything that I've done has been kind of encapsulated around this car. But when I got this particular one, and I was like ready to experience, like really experience my own third gen RX-7, it was in such an in-between state of tune that I didn't really fall in love with it. The motor was fast and the motor was built, but nothing else was touched. It was a completely stock slate other than the motor, which, mind you, made 417 horsepower at the wheels and 328 pound-feet of torque. That's dynojet numbers at about 16, 17 pounds of boost. So it was a rocket, but it didn't have the setup to really work appropriately. So this is a 1993 Touring automatic. He converted it to a manual. It still has the original 13B REW, but it's been rebuilt and street ported. And it's a larger single Garrett T04S 60-1 turbo. So I decided, I'm going to try to set this car up as best I can. I gave it the same treatment that I gave both of the Miatas. I tore all the subframes off, suspension, undercoated the whole underbody, replaced every bushing with polyurethane, all brand new suspension hardware. The whole underside of this car is completely restored. Looks nicer than what it came out of the dealer in. Got the car aligned to a proper alignment, and then when I'll never forget the first time I drove it and really started grabbing it by the scruff of its neck. And now I had that confidence because the chassis was communicating properly and things were working properly in the suspension, and it was one of those euphoric moments. I have a lot of AA arm cars. Just about everything that I own is a AA arm car, with the exception of the BMW Z4M and the RX-8, which is AA arm front but uses a multi-link rear. The BMW, of course, is a strut car in the front. I love AA arm cars because they offer that heroic turn-in and mechanical grip. But I also hate AA arm cars at the same time, because when you approach the limits at a higher speed in an oversteer situation, there's a little bit of springiness in those rear arms, and when you lose traction, when you break traction, especially with grippier tires, it kind of pushes the car and makes it snap a little bit more. Because of that great handling or great grip, you get an edgier car at the limit. The FD, on the other hand, is the best one that I've ever driven, and I think most of that is because of the spherical pillow ball bushings that are used in the rear. They offset some of that springiness when you load up that rear suspension, so when it breaks away, it's much more graceful and it's just much more easier to deal with. Plus the car's a little bit longer wheelbase versus like Miata, and I think the whole package just works well. The size of this car proportionally is about perfect for me. It's not too big, but it's not too small. It's an intimate cabin, but it's not Miata small. You have some room to sprawl out and move around. The weight is about perfect, I think, for a sports car. Even though this was a touring, with the manual transmission swap, it's got a lot of stuff taken out of it, but it's still very streetable. It retains a full interior. This car weighed in at 2,770 pounds. Oh no, I'm sorry, 2,670 pounds. So under 2,700 pounds, and it still retains everything that it needs to be streetable. So let's talk about the car. After I picked the car up, I wasn't sure what direction I want to go in with it. I have been enamored with FDs ever since the idea of actually owning one came into play. So from 2004 to 2010, I was pretty much planning my ideal RX-7 build. On my cell phone alone, I have over 5,000 FD RX-7 pictures. And that's just kind of what I do. I collect pictures for the cars that I'm interested in. Anything that has a key point that highlights for me or kind of sticks out to me, I save it and I go back and reference it and I study it and I use that to kind of plan out my builds and come up with ideas of my own. But I have looked at so many body options for these cars, every body kit imaginable, and yes, some of the wider bodies, they do offer a real, like, overall cool package. They look very aggressive and they just flow well with the lines of the car. But the more and more I studied it, I just feel like a lot of those kits start to take away from the inherent elegance of the car, and that's the key word. It's elegance. These body lines for a car that came out of the early 90s is honestly, in my opinion, one of the most beautiful cars ever made. And even in modern terms, this car just looks absolutely gorgeous. So anytime I would try to talk myself up to doing something a little bit more for the exterior, I usually back out because I'm afraid I'm going to take away that elegance of the car. So the body of this car remains mostly stock, with the exception of the 99 spec front end. Now, I went with this because I feel like with the rest of the car, it kind of just updates it and makes it look like kind of modern but still classic at the same time. And I know there's a lot of people who kind of gripe about the license plate in the front, but this bumper without that license plate, in my opinion, just doesn't work. It makes it look too smiley. It just looks like too happy and goofy. So that's why I didn't go with that, and I went with the OEM bumper. And I think the RX-7 plate just kind of makes it acceptable and gets it by. It just, to me, looks proper. I love the more aggressive front lip on it with the vents. I mean, you could see the Garage Very lips on my Miatas. I would swear that Garage Very styled them after the FD RX-7 because they have the vents on the side and they stick out a little bit farther. But that's the exact reason why I went with those lips for those cars, is because everything was on my brain was FD3S. And I love the more aggressive turn signal lamps that come on the 99 spec. So that's why I went with that. Moving along to the interior of this car, again, this car is not a complete build, but it's a very well set up car at this point. I basically did everything that I could have did to make it work well and not leave me like with a burning desire to do more, because at the end of the day, I need to dive into the other 93 RX-7 that I have, the clean slate. And that's going to be like the ultimate build. That's going to be the no expense spared. That's the one that's critical for me, to try to do everything as perfect as possible. It really is going to be my halo build. What is the best car that I can possibly build? That's what that car is to be. But diving into this and doing everything that I've done, this was a great foundation to really learn and understand the engineering behind these cars, how the suspension is set up, understand the rotary engine, what some of its quirks and resolutions, and all of that, everything that I've learned is going to be applied to the other build. So moving into the interior, we'll talk about these seats first. These are a set of 997 Porsche GT3 replica seats. They're carbon backed. They're wrapped in Alcantara. I went with these seats for a couple reasons. One, the stock seats in this car just don't work for me. They sit too high. When I'm turning the wheel, I find myself hitting my thighs with my hands, so I needed a lower seating position. They offered that. I originally had a set of Recaro SPGs in here, but no matter what I did, whatever rail solution I used, I would find the wings of them rubbing up on the door panels, and I couldn't close the door without actually kind of like having to give a good heave-ho to get it to close, pushing up against the wings of the seat. So the GT3 seats have a narrower wing set, and it fits the smaller cabin of the FD. Those of you with Miatas S2000s or FD RX-7s, you understand that these cars all have smaller cabins, so putting a proper seat in them is a little bit more of a challenge. The other thing is that the base of these seats is modeled after a Recaro pole position, which is about an inch wider. It may even be 2 inches, but it's wider than the regular SPG, so it gives you a little bit more comfort to your hips. And the side bolsters are not as aggressive. So I think this works well as like a good compromise street bucket seat. So you get the lightweight factor, the lower seating position of running a fixed back bucket, but you are allowed to use a factory seatbelt, and ingress and egress isn't as much of a challenge as like a full-on race bucket. So this is about as aggressive as I would go for a street car, but these seats work really well in that regard. Plus, I love the way they look. I think they actually fit the cabin quite well. And I get a lot of questions about them. A lot of people see the seats and they're like, wow, what kind of seat is that? And it's just kind of funny. Oh yeah, they're 911 GT3 replicas, and they're like, oh really? But anyways, they're mounted on a set of Niklas Auto seat rails, but I had to modify the rails to make them work. Because of the wider base, wider pole position base, I had to cut the L brackets off of them and spread them out a little bit farther to accommodate the bigger width of the seat base and re-weld them onto the rails. So that's what I did for that. The steering wheel is it is my most favorite steering wheel that's currently available. It's a 350 millimeter personal Neo Grinta, and it's wrapped in Alcantara, and this one's red stitched to match the Redline Goods red stitched shift boot, e-brake boot, and center console wrap. The steering wheel is mounted to an Energy quick release, which is then mounted to a Daikai or Daikai, I don't know how to pronounce it very well, steering wheel hub. Other than that, the interior has 3 gauges on the gauge pod in the center of the dash, oil pressure, oil temperature, and water temperature. As far as boost goes, I run a Greddy Profect B boost controller on this, so I get a boost readout here. I didn't feel the need to add a boost gauge. I don't personally like a ton of gauges in a car, and I especially don't like pillar gauges. I feel like they stick out a little bit too much, and I don't like the reduction in visibility that they come with. So having the center pod on the dash, I think that works really well because it doesn't really get in the way, and it looks like it just it's meant to be there. So I think that's a nice touch. The shift knob is a Modiction Anvil 2, I want to say is the model. It's nicely weighted. I think it works well with the transmission. I have a stainless e-brake button. I don't remember where I got it from, but that's about it for the cabin. In the back, I have a Sakibon Garage fire extinguisher mount and a Halon fire extinguisher in the event, God forbid, it catches on fire. I've seen videos of FDs catch on fire. I don't ever want to be that guy who's sitting there on the side of the road watching his car burn to a crisp. So I made it a point to put a fire extinguisher in any of my cars that the fuel system's been really gone into. Speaking of fuel systems, let's move along into the engine bay. So like I was saying, as this was a 93 Touring, this is the original motor that came with the car. It's since been rebuilt. It's street ported with moderately aggressive street port. It's not terribly aggressive, but it's not small either. It's just kind of somewhere in the middle. And rebuilt with all new seals. It uses Rotary Aviation 2mm apex seals. The turbocharger is mounted on a custom manifold that my friend made. And it's mounted to a Garrett TO4S 60-1. Coming off of the charge pipe is a custom charge pipe that we made. It has an old school Greddy Type R blow-off valve. I should also add that the wastegate for this is an external Greddy, old school Greddy. I think they were as a Type R. I don't remember what the exact brand or model was, but it's a Greddy wastegate, and it's rerouted into the downpipe. The exhaust is a full 3-inch from the downpipe all the way back. The midpipe is modified. We welded in a Racing Beat bigger resonator in it, and the exhaust exits out the back out of a Racing Beat twin tip 3-inch exhaust. This is probably one of the quietest 400 plus horsepower single turbo RX-7s in the world. I actually get my balls busted a lot by my friends because they say it's too quiet and all you hear is turbo noise. It could use a little bit more volume, but the exhaust setup that was on it when I bought the car was just it was too loud. I mean, it was air deafening, and it was just drony and boomy. I wouldn't mind a little bit more volume, but right now I don't feel like there's any burning desire to have to change this setup. So coming off of the turbo, going into the intercooler, this is a custom V-mount setup. Uses a coil radiator. This is an Isuzu turbo diesel box truck intercooler, and coming into a custom charge pipe that we made into the stock throttle body, stock intake manifold. The fuel system on this car, starting from the tank, it has a Bosch 044, big fuel pump. Comes to a Holley adjustable fuel pressure regulator, feeding a set of 800cc primary and 1200cc secondary injectors. Everything is controlled by a Haltech old school E6K, very old school, runs in DOS, standalone ECU. We spent a great deal of time tuning this setup to make it as drivable as possible. The older ECU does have a couple quirks, but for the most part, the overall package works really well. We even adapted the factory idle air control valve to it to allow the car to idle on its own without any human interaction giving it gas on a cold start. So overall, the whole setup works. The idle air control valve does a couple funny things on a cold start, but after 3 or 4 hunting, like it catches itself and it works. So other than that, there's a couple peripheral bolt-ons to it, aluminum accessory pulleys, stainless steel oil filler neck with a baffle in it, mounted to a Greddy oil catch cam. So like I said, my tuner buddy, actually I should kind of talk a little bit about him. We became friends after he tuned my Civic, so we've been friends for quite a long time. Every one of my cars that has a standalone ECU in it, he's helped me a great deal with the tuning. I'm at the point now where I can tune a car and make it safe, but he's just much quicker, really knows a great balance of power versus safety, not pushing things where you don't have to, dialing back ignition timing if it's not making any more power, or just to kind of keep the engine running a little bit smoother. He's fantastic. So him and I have been great friends for a long time now, and it's just kind of funny, everything that we've done. Finishing off with the motor, so like I said, for the cooling, it's got the custom V-mount setup, and this uses a double oil cooler setup. We took another touring model oil cooler, modified it, and made it a dual setup. Only the R1 and R2 models came with dual oil coolers. Base and touring came with just one. So yeah, the cooling system on this works fantastic. The 99 spec bumper has bigger inlets, and because these oil coolers are non-thermostatic, I actually have a hard time keeping oil temp up when driving it on the street unless it's on a very hot day. So a lot of times, and if you watched any of my photos of this car in the past, you'll sometimes catch cardboard over the oil coolers just to keep it so I can maintain a proper oil temperature and actually get on the car. So that's about it for the engine setup. Lastly, the suspension of this car, like I said earlier, has been completely overhauled and restored. Everything, including the transmission and differential, have been professionally painted and clear coated. Every rubber bushing has been replaced with polyurethane. All brand new OEM pillow ball bushings, hardware and alignment eccentrics. The dampers are Teen Flex, 10 kg front and 8 kg rear springs. The car is a big tubular racing beat front sway bar. The rear suspension has adjustable toe and trailing arms. Power from the motor goes through an Exidy 12-pound flywheel, ACT 6-puck unsprung race clutch, and an extreme pressure plate. Power runs through the factory Torsen limited slip differential with a 4.1 ratio, where it finally makes its way to the ground through a set of 17 by 9.5 plus 38 millimeter offset Enkei RPF1 wheels wrapped in 255/40/17 Kumo XS. Stopping power is handled by a set of Hawk HP Plus brake pads using the OEM 4-piston front calipers and rear single-piston calipers. In addition, the OEM rubber brake lines have been replaced with a set of stainless lines, and the factory ABS unit has been deleted, and a Willwood brake proportioning valve has been put in place. I never understood why people replace the brakes on these cars. The front rotors and pads are more than sufficient, even at the power level that this car is making, with a set of aggressive pads on it. I really think it's just kind of more for an aesthetics thing, but the factory brakes are definitely up to handling the power of this car, and that's pretty impressive for a car that came out of the factory in 1992. But overall, like I said, this car has and always will be my most favorite car. I absolutely love the FD RX-7. Everything that I've done in my automotive experience and every car purchase was some way in shape or form either influenced or directed because of the package that this car offers. I love double bubble roofs because I love the FD RX-7's double bubble roofs. Oh, I should point that out. I don't like how the Touring has a sunroof. I think it disrupts that line a little bit and it bothers me, but my white 93 RX-7 is a base and it has a pure double bubble. I'm not going to complain because I love this car, and this was really the first dream car purchase. Yeah, I just can't express like how much I've sweated over these cars and wanted one for so long. And the day that I finally took it home was it was one of the best feelings in the world. And even like now, standing here looking at it and watching the way the light reflects off of these lines, it's just, it almost like it makes, I don't even know what to say. It just makes me clam up a little bit because I'm just so happy and so thankful to be able to own an awesome car like this. And everything that's happened with the house, if some of you have followed some of my other videos, this was really a dream property, and I put my heart and soul into buying this place and making everything work. But it's times like these, it's just like, I don't care if I have a bad day, I don't care if I have a bad week. I'm very lucky, very, very lucky, and I'm very fortunate. So I don't mean to get too sentimental here and sappy, so I'm gonna spare you guys with that. But we're gonna break down the driving impression for this car into 2 segments because I understand this is a little bit longer. So I hope you enjoyed that, and I hope you guys understand just how much this car means to me and how significant of a role it played in my automotive journey. All right, enough blabbling. Let's get out there and give her a good road impression.